Can a baby who converted marry a Kohen?
Can a baby who converted marry a Kohen?
Mm-hmm.
Did the baby convert while he was inside his mother or outside?
Outside.
So, really, the answer is it doesn't really matter. A convert cannot marry a Kohen unless there's one condition. Torah says that a Kohen is not allowed to marry a Zonah. He's not allowed to marry a widow. He's not allowed to marry a convert. And he's not allowed to marry a divorcee. Now, a convert being one of them, that means that whether the convert was a someone that converted when he was 2-3 years old, or he converted when he was 13 years old, needless to say, he's still a convert. He cannot marry, or she cannot marry a Kohen. Now, or she cannot marry a Kohen. Now, this should not offend the converts. It should not offend the converts. Or for some reason, many converts are stuck on this issue. It's like the one thing you're not allowed, but dafka they care about this question. I've gotten this question, I would say, probably about 50 times over the years. And always comes from converts. I want to marry a Kohen. Do you even know a Kohen? No, but just in case I find one. Well, you can't find, you have all of Am Yisrael, but you have to find the Kohen that you're not allowed to marry? You can't marry anybody else? Shows us natural instinct of a human being is to want what they can't have. So Torah says that he cannot marry a convert. But I can also tell you someone that has a much more difficult time than a convert. Much more difficult time. And that is someone that's a zonah. Now most people think that a zonah is a prostitute. Because that's one of the literal definitions for a zonah. But I have a chidush for you guys. The Gemara says, who's a zonah? It says a woman that had intimacy with a goy. She's considered a zonah. Meaning, if a Jewish woman, a Bat Israel, born Jewish, her father's a big rabbi, her brother's a big rabbi, her cousin's a big rabbi, everybody's a big rabbi. But one time she got drunk at her friend's graduation party, and, one thing led to the other, and Peter became her husband for the day. Years pass. She forgets about this mistake. She finds a nice Jewish boy that happens to be a Kohen. She wants to marry him. He wants to marry her. Guess what? Not allowed to marry. Why? She's considered a zonah. She's not allowed to marry the Kohen. Unfortunately, people don't know this, and many times this happens. Many times this happens. But halachically, not allowed to marry. I had this situation. A Ba'ala Tshuva, Baruch Hashem, changed her life. She wanted to get married. She found some guy, was a Kohen, and she asked me, am I allowed to marry him? I said, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to marry him because your ex-boyfriend was a non-Jew. And even though, she goes, yeah, but I did tshuva. I said, yeah, you're 100% right. You're tzadikah. But there's still something that happened. There's still something that happened, and there's a consequence for this action. Consequence is you have to find somebody else. Not that you can't marry anybody else. You can marry anybody else, just not him. And this was very, very painful for her, and I would tell you, I think at least just as painful for me to tell her. Because she's mamash tzadikah. But that's the way, Rabotai. There are certain rules in the Torah that are inexplainable, something that are beyond our rationale. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to keep the Kohanim with a certain level of purity, but unfortunately today there are many people that are named Kohen and they're not even Jewish. I have a guy I went to high school with. I wanted to send him a package, well, a Kiruv package, to see, hopefully get this guy to do tshuva. I saw a picture of him on the internet. He was not exactly, didn't look religious to me. So I asked him, listen, I haven't seen you, John, I haven't seen you in a long time. And but I figured I'd send you a package. I deal with Kiruv now. I help people do tshuva. He goes, what's tshuva? I said, Hashem Yachem. He's even worse than I thought. I explained to him what tshuva. He says, I don't need the package. I said, what, you religious? He goes, no, I'm not Jewish. I said, but your name is Kohen. He said, So? There's a lot of Kohens that are not even Jewish. Why? Because, unfortunately, people have made sins in the past. So, as far as halachically is concerned, a convert cannot marry a Kohen. That's a rule in the Torah. If the convert does marry a Kohen, then the kids lose their kehuna, meaning the children from, if the Kohen insists on marrying a convert or a divorcee or a widow, then the kids lose their kehuna, meaning they're not allowed to give birkat kohanim. They're not kohanim. They're called halal. So this is also an issue. Now there is one exception to the rule. A Kohen is allowed to marry a convert if the Kohen cannot bring children to the world. If the man cannot bring children to the world, he has some type of illness or something like that, he cannot bring any children to the world, then he's allowed to marry a convert. That's the exception. Or a widow or a divorcee or so on. Meaning, what does that really mean? Kadosh Baruch Hu does not want the children from this marriage. For whatever reason he decided, listen, if you run the world, you can run the world the way you want. Until then, you have to listen to the one that runs the world called Hashem. That's the reason. That's the real reason. I can give you 50 other reasons. But in reality, that's the reason. Hashem said so. That's the reason for every one of the mitzvot. And I know it doesn't agree with some people, and some people get offended to it. Be offended. It's good. It shows that this touched your heart.